are listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's time to head south with the Fantha From Down Under. Here's your host, Adam O'Brien.
G'day there, folks. How you doing? This is the Fantha From Down Under, coming to you live from Queensland's Canteen and the Gold Coast of Australia for episode number 65. So we've been going for 65 episodes here on Fantha Tracks Radio, and big thanks to all of you listeners out there for listening over the last 5 years, and here's to 5 more. I tell you what, for a bunch of Star Wars fans, we certainly put out a lot of content. This podcast is no slouch in that department. Here for 2023, Happy New Year and Merry Christmas for last year. And I hope you're ready for another massive year of Star Wars. And we're going to get into some of that news and stuff and all that more very, very soon. And I want to wish all my fellow Star Wars fans out there, and particularly, of course, our Fantha Tracks crowd, Happy New Year as well. And may the Force be with you all as we head into, of course, another year. And 2023, it's come around fast, folks. I mean, the last 3 years have been incredibly fast when it comes to everything that's been happening in the world, particularly in a world post-COVID, which is, pretty much almost back to normal. Of course, it has definitely hit productions of TV and film, and of course for Star Wars itself. They've been pumping out some great stuff. We're going to be chatting about that very, very soon here, but quickly just let you know, we are on the Fantha Tracks Radio Network, which you can find on just about any podcast source. You can also find it, of course, at fanthatracks.com for your Star Wars news in a single file. So 2023, we're just literally out the door with January, and there's a lot of fun stuff coming up. Obviously, New Bad Batch as well, which so for all the fans that are in animation, that's out there. And I've got to say that I've only seen the first few episodes of the first season, so it's something new for me to check out with Star Wars as well. We've just had Star Wars Andor, which we've been covering here quite a bit, Tales of the Jedi, which is actually quite an interesting little mini set of episodes of animation. And in some ways, it kind of reminds me of, if you look back at Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars, but Clone Wars, which was really interesting sort of set of 2 volumes, but it had the same timing and the same feel as what we got with these new ones too. With Star Wars, current storytelling, they can't let go of the Clone Wars. And to be honest, with the way that we kind of telling stories right now, there's pre-prequel era, but there's also sequel era as well. There's rumor, Star Wars project codenamed Ghost Track 17. You're seeing the highlights this is from Star Wars News Net. Again, these are rumors, folks. Take them with a grain of salt, but these are some of the headlines. Another new Star Wars TV show rumored to be moving forward as well. TV is the thing right now. Definitely be setting up some new stuff when it comes to film over the next couple of years. Of course, they've got a new producer that's involved in doing some movies. He was involved with Star Trek, particularly the first and the third film in that series. So we're talking about Star Trek and Star Trek Beyond. Into Darkness was not exactly up to the par of storytelling that the others were, but those had the same sort of adventurous feel that current Star Wars has, in between their massive, huge battle sequences and stuff like that. That running adventure feel, which George definitely brought to the third film. I don't believe they were really thinking that for, of course, A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. And that's what makes moving forward this even more interesting. Andor definitely got back to the kind of storytelling we're used to in A New Hope. The idea of building up to the excitement of adventure and action is definitely the better room of storytelling. There's quite a few fans that weren't in that same vote of confidence when it came to that. Of course, they wanted more action. They wanted more in the lines of what we got with, of course, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which was fantastic. Anyone who's a fan growing up, whether it's from the classic era to the prequels, has, for the majority, enjoyed the Kenobi show. It was definitely a love letter to the prequel era. We knew on Mustafar something was going to happen, right? But at the same time, now we've got this, sort of epilogue, if you like, of particularly bringing back Ewan and Hayden was just a stroke of genius. And they're obviously very friendly. They obviously like each other and spend obviously a huge chunk of time in Australia down here making Attack of the Clones and, of course, Revenge of the Sith. And they're in the papers down here all the time, as was George, by the way. going down to a local food court and sitting down to a food court meal with a Diet Coke, folks. That's a true story, and it's in the newspapers out here in Australia. But there's just so much on the way. We've got the Acolyte. Interesting that it's going to be set prior to the Phantom Menace in this new timeline, which I'll be honest, as a fan, I don't know that much about. I've read maybe, I think it was 2 of the books I've read so far out of that series. But I like the idea. The High Republic is an era which is, I do believe it's 100 to 200 years before Phantom Menace. So it's a different time. We're starting to see why the Jedi were getting antiquated, to the point where the Sith basically found their way in. And then we're going to see that in the Acolyte series. I think it's going to be cloak and dagger, the spy sort of stuff. It's something that hasn't been done out of all this. It's a completely different angle, I think, to look at the Force wielders in this universe. So we'll probably see Yoda. If you're going to have anything to do with Jedi in that era, I mean, Yoda would definitely be a part of that too. Do we see Yaddle? Who knows? I mean, we don't know how old Yaddle is by the time of the Phantom Menace. But we did see her in a certain other show, didn't we? But also, I think the great thing with the recent shows, in particular Tales of the Jedi, we got to see a character which I think we've only really seen parts where he fell to the dark side, and that's Count Dooku. When I first saw things, I think it was the episode 2 select series when George would get a photo put up on the StarWars.com website. And I think it was in the year 2000. I think they were starting to film out here in Australia. And it was a little hint at what you're going to see in Attack of the Clones. So we saw little bits and pieces of that popping up here and there. I think the hint of what we were going to see, just to sort of startle my imagination, is particularly with the concept of a more rapier-like weapon for Dooku. Somebody that loves the musketeers, and Zorro in particular, which is more a saber, I guess, than a rapier. We know that Christopher Lee's well-versed in that type of cinematic fighting. Back then, that was, what I was so interested in when I heard the late, great Christopher Lee was going to be involved. Plus, he's a Bond villain, folks, the man with the golden gun. It is interesting, the fact that he really was, when you think about it, James Bond. Related to Fleming, I think the key thing here is that he really, in World War II, was one of those guys that did secret missions, just like 007. Hats off to him for his service and all that sort of stuff too. So fantastic.
Hey, this is Daniel Jose Older, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Getting back to it, I was just so intrigued into the character. Why did he fall? What made him join Sidious? All those sorts of things. And we start to see some of that. It was kind of in my mind's eye that they would do it the way they did it, and they have, thanks to some of the audio books that were done and obviously some of the ties to some of the novels which have come out. It was great. Plus, we get to see a young Qui-Gon. I remember years ago watching The Bounty and Kroll, and a few other films which Liam Neeson was involved in. Did you know he was involved in the Delta Force? Blink and you miss it, but he's there. With that too, I had an idea what was Liam Neeson, or in this case Qui-Gon Jinn, like as an apprentice. We get to see it obviously under the tutelage of somebody like Dooku. Dooku is at a point where he is ready to obviously leave the Jedi Order, or at least in this case, put it aside for something different. Doesn't mean it's darkness, but definitely something that wasn't to his standing and all that sort of thing. It was definitely not what he was after, I don't think, too. Do they go back and do a young Qui-Gon series? Who knows? Definitely would be interesting. Whether it's that or as he meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, which we got an inkling of kind of what that was like, and of course, Master and Apprentice.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So we've got that coming. We've obviously got this new Star Wars film coming off from Damon Lindelof. I do like the work that he's done, but I think somebody like Damon Lindelof, he works more in TV, definitely a number of film projects. But from looking at what you're going to do, basically it's Star Wars 10. They've already said that this film will be, or at least I think they've said that this is going to be post The Rise of Skywalker. What threat do you bring in? What is the new equivalent of the Empire, or is it something completely different? Do you bring in pirates? Do you make some kind of civil war maybe? I don't know. But there needs to be something to drive the drama. There needs to be a MacGuffin. Is it the Jedi take a backseat in this one and it becomes more of a straight up series completely different? I don't know. Who knows? But I think the one thing that will definitely continue somehow, the whole Star Wars is not Star Wars without the Jedi. That is part of what obviously they've been driving everything in this series. Is it Rey that creates an entire new Jedi Order, and this is set 20 years later, maybe. I don't know. But the rough idea is that this is not directly tied to that universe, and it's going to be something a bit different. We haven't heard about, of course, Rian Johnson's films, what's going on there. For most fans, they believe that it's been put on the back burner, or at least on the shelf, and never to be picked up again. But I think the interesting thing is there you've got a filmmaker who is confident, knows what he wants. It might not be to everyone's taste, and that's a legitimate argument. But also, he's proven with his own original material, things like the film I think he did better than any of these, and that's including his Star Wars work. And that's, of course, Looper with Bruce Willis. And it's definitely Bruce Willis's best performance in years. The idea of time travel and all that sort of stuff, So he's a capable filmmaker of doing some really interesting stuff. But I do believe he needs to be in his own original setting for it to really blossom and bloom, because he needs to be in control. That's the one thing that Ryan's work needs to be. He's somebody that is able to put something out and put it in completion and do it well. For him, it needs, and I think that's where he obviously did quite a bit of TV as well. But for me, it needs to be in a completely different area of the universe, not have any ties to it, so they can just run amok with his own story and really come up with something solid for itself. And then you don't have the idea of that it's tied to something else. Regardless, he can have his freedom in that, even though it's George's sandbox, or the sandbox of Disney now. He has the freedom to really let his story come alive, more so than anything you could do within some other sandbox. So to me, that is the way forward. But he's shown interest with, of course, his producer into maybe doing a TV series instead. Either way, interesting, and I'd like to see what he comes up with. I think at the end of the day, these definitely, particularly with the technology that we currently have, Avatar's a hell of a lot to blame for TV and stuff like that. Mainly the way that they use the volume. Obviously, these camera systems and stuff. Cameron didn't do that. Cameron's using motion capture for the majority of it too. But he's using something similar to that so that he can visualize for the actors what they're going to be doing and how it goes through. If anyone's seen Avatar, the new one, of course, The Way of the Water, you can get a sense of just where the levels of technology are when it comes to CGI. And in particular, the CGI involved in that film alone, is 3D as well. So it's an interesting way of bringing forward the level of technology to the point where, yes, the 3D is meant to jump out at us, and it does. But the biggest thing is the trick that it does to the eye, the flow of the motion and stuff like that. I don't know, what do you call it? It wasn't blurred like sometimes you see on film. It was a bit too lifelike, and that kind of took me out of the film a little bit. We yet to see that with Star Wars. I think the thing is with these TV shows, they've used it the right way and really building up these backgrounds and the worlds that the characters inhabit. And The Mandalorian did that well, and that's obviously building all these other shows towards that. Andor a little bit differently. Obviously, Andor used a lot of real locations, real sets and stuff like that too. That's the closest we've gotten to a real Star Wars film. Only long form telling of the story and stuff like that too, which was done beautifully. It is without a doubt the best Star Wars I've seen since Return of the Jedi. Better than the films for me, and better than the Kenobi series, because the storytelling was gradual, and it was the point where we got to know everybody in the series. I think second only to that is Kenobi, almost on the same level for me of excitement. And there's a couple of moments here and there in Kenobi for me that weren't quite right, but for the most part, it was pretty damn good. Forward from here, obviously, we're going to get second seasons of things too. Second season of Andor, how much that jumps forward in time and stuff like that, particularly where we see Cassian Andor himself in terms of the Rebel Alliance and how far forward he's going to be. But also we get to see a sense of where Kenobi will be as well. Do we bring in Maul? Is Maul going to be in this? Are we going to see what we saw animated in Rebels in live action, which would be interesting to get Ray Park back out there. He's super fit always. Why not use him? If he's super fit, just do it. And to get these two Scotsmen back together and get them smashing swords again together would be great. Obviously, Ewan had a lot of fun getting back into it as well. So we got the Ahsoka series, which can be interesting. We've got some really interesting actors involved in that one too.
Hi, this is John Morton from The Empire Strikes Back, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So for you listeners out there, what did you get that was Star Wars for Christmas? Let us know here. Let us know in the comments section wherever you're watching this podcast. Did you get a bedspread? Did you get a coffee mug? Did you get the Black Series figures that are out now. There's some great ones, actually. I got to say, JB Hi-Fi out here in Australia. So, of course, this being an Australian correspondent, I'm going to let you know where to find the best range. I would say usually Zing, but Zing Pop Culture doesn't seem to have the best out there right now. They got more Avatar. And obviously, too, there's some great stuff that we're seeing from JB when it comes to pop culture. They've got whole walls now dedicated to more than Zing has. So go out to JB Hi-Fi, get your movies, get everything from there. They do a fantastic job and well and truly on their way to becoming probably the premier place to check stuff out, especially here in Australia, folks. If they don't have it on the shelves, they can certainly get it for you.
Well, that's all we have time for here tonight on the Fantha From Down Under. And we'll catch you next time. Same place, same channel, and of course, with more Star Wars news in a single file from FanthaTracks.com's Australian edition. That's right, we'll catch you next time. So, until then, may the Force be with you, and enjoy your Star Wars fandom. We'll see you next time.
Warning, no Tauntauns were harmed in the filming and recording of this podcast.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.